Hey everyone, and thanks for joining today. I have Holly with me, and we are talking about using storytelling in the world of business. So, quick before we get started, Holly, can you do a quick introduction?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me, James. My name is Holly Marley Henshin. I am a brand strategist, a certified story brand guide, a copywriter, and a word witch. And I help businesses that care, passionate businesses, find the right words to reel in the right customers for them so they can make money while they make the world a better place.
Awesome, thank you. So, you are an expert at the StoryBrand framework, and I love that. I love the book from Donald Miller, and that's why I wanted to have you on to really kind of talk about what that is and why it's important in the world of marketing and copy. So, do you want to quick talk about why storytelling is important when it relates to marketing copy and how we're positioning our business?
Yeah, definitely. Storytelling is the best way to teach. Our brains evolved through storytelling, like storytelling around campfires, at bedtime. Like that is just how our brains absorb information through stories. We all know the hero's journey, every Disney movie, every like religious text story has a hero's journey in it, and our brains are just tuned in to stories, right? If you want people to pay attention to what you're saying, just put it in that story format, and if you put it in the right format, all the things just click into place for people, and it's a lot easier for them to understand when they know what's going to come next. A lot of people kind of make fun of Hollywood movies because you know exactly what's going to come next, but at the same time that's what you're there for and that's what you expect. If you want to be uncomfortable, I guess go to the art house. But if you want to tell a story, tell it in the hero's journey fashion.
No, it makes sense, and that's something I know he mentions. He being Donald Miller in the book, too. That like once you know this framework, once you kind of understand how that hero's journey framework works, it does kind of ruin a lot of movies for you because it's very predictable. But even though it ruins the movie for us, having that suspense and that character who has the problem they need to overcome, it's a very like natural thing, like you're saying, for us to kind of think through that process of like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, look, I want to find out what happens next because you know what's going to happen next because that's called part of that story is trying to figure out what's going to happen in between. I know for me personally, when I was, I'm more on the sales side, not the copywriting side, on the marketing side, as you are. And just for me to position sales conversations in this framework is really impactful too. Because I think so many salespeople come into conversations and they want to be the hero of the story. They want to like solve their customer's problem. When you're looking at this framework, it's like the customer is actually the hero. You're kind of more of that guide that kind of brings them along on that journey and that process too. So I just got not to like say exactly how that works and stuff. How do you recommend businesses frame their marketing or frame their brand? Or how do they be effective with that storytelling framework?
Sure. That's a great question because it's typically a 180 for people when they're thinking about storytelling in their brands to think about telling their story from the customer's perspective. You know, everyone wants to tell their own story and be the hero and talk about the history of their brand and why they did it. And I know finding your why has been a big thing in branding and marketing. Not to discount that, but I don't think it should be front and center. I think what should be front and center is your customers' journey through the hero's journey from there. So there are 7 points in every hero's journey. This is also known as the StoryBrand 7. And okay, so there's a character. The character wants something. The character has a problem getting what they want. The character meets a guide who is empathetic and authoritative. That's your brand. The customer is the hero. Your brand is the guide. And so the guide then shows them how they can succeed, how they could fail, and then the customer slash hero chooses success and they're like transformed in the process. So walking your customer through their own hero's journey as the guide is the best way to position your brand and your customer story. So just thinking of it as your customer story versus your own story really takes it takes some time to get there, but once you do, it makes so much sense.
Yeah, I was popping back on early because I was just saying I'm impressed you can remember that framework off the top of your head. But obviously, you do it more often, or that's kind of what you do. Obviously, the process, and that's. I think it's helpful to people know they can plug and play that script in there and kind of know, okay, here's how my brand can be figured this way. But in that process, what are the main, like you mentioned one already, which I saw back from my website design days of a lot of businesses just talking about themselves and their history, and like the history page is a big deal. Like, the stereotypical, like, our business was founded in 1929. And like, they start listing all these old people that don't matter to the actual customer anymore too. But what other, I guess, common mistakes do you see businesses make, or like pitfalls they fall into when it comes to how they're writing their brand copy, and kind of position themselves in the context of, this bigger storytelling framework?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think the big thing to keep in mind is when you're telling your customer's story to them, you want to keep it so short and simple. A lot of times people will add in everything they can think the first time they're talking to their customer, and it's just overwhelming because your brain wasn't built to handle all that information, and it's not going to retain that information. So what you want to do is break your customer's story into bite-sized pieces for them so they can absorb it, and so that they'll retain it and remember it, so it's memorable. I mean, that's what branding is, like branding your information into your customer's brain. So a lot of times people try to add too many elements to the story. With StoryBrand, what we do is we take one problem your customer is having and one problem one customer is having. Not all your customers, just the one that you want to work with most at this time. And you walk them through their problem, how they feel, how they could fail, and then how they could succeed by working with you to solve their problem. So not throwing too much information at people from the get-go is really important. So too many elements, too many problems, trying to hit too many customers with the same story. And another huge one is people trying to be cute and clever. Cute and clever makes people think an extra step. They recognize it and they see, oh, that's something I'm supposed to recognize. And then their brain has to burn more calories to figure out what it is, right? And the thing is that people will buy inferior products that they understand better. And I'm not saying peddle an inferior product or service, but people want to understand easily what they're buying, what the benefits are to them. So you just have to lay it out there for people. And it's really counterintuitive to how we've been taught to write, how we've been taught to communicate. But when someone has a problem and you present them in a very easy to understand way, how they can solve their problem and how they're going to feel afterwards, they're going to be into it. And my final little tip is to use the magic word, which is you. Say you all the time, and people will keep reading because they want to read their own story.
Yeah, that's awesome. Those are great tips. And it's funny because I always think, like you said, people want to be clever. They want to have use big words and sound smart and that kind of thing. But it just reminds me of the book, Thinking Fast and Slow. And they talk about cognitive ease and that whole concept of even things like using fonts that are easier to read. Anything you can do that just makes it easier to comprehend exactly what you're saying right away makes it easier for the customer, which means it's going to stick faster in their mind too. So again, from my background in the design world, I'm thinking of contrast and colors and fonts and stuff, but then the word choice and then using a story framework also reduces that cognitive burden on people's mind too, which again makes you want to buy their product more. So this all sounds great. Telling a story in your brand sounds good. What are next steps? If someone's watching this and they're like, okay, I know that our website has bad copy or our brand's not positioned correctly. What are the next steps you'd recommend for them to kind of rewrite their brand or their website copy in this framework?
Sure. I'd say educate yourself. If you go to my website, brighterbrandmarketing.com, there is a link to the StoryBrand marketing report assessment for businesses, and it takes about 10 minutes to fill out. And afterwards, you get a customized brand marketing plan to help you generate more revenue for your business. So that's at brighterbrandmarketing.com. You have to scroll down a little bit, but it's the only place that you can enter your information. And then if you're a podcast person, the Marketing Made Simple podcast with JJ Peterson and April Sunshine are fantastic, like 30-minute bites of really interesting people talking about really interesting marketing topics. And they're always topical. You can go back and listen to them from years prior and they'll still make sense today. And then also Donald Miller is the creator of StoryBrand, and his books Building a Story Brand and then Marketing Made Simple are really great primers on how to use the StoryBrand process and just how to start thinking from your customer's perspective.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. And I could definitely endorse those resources too, as far as just like really good, spots to start learning the framework. And then as you want to implement it, especially reaching out to someone like you who knows the framework and knows how to implement the copy of it is a very nice thing too. Any last parting thoughts you wanted to share with anybody as we wrap up here?
Ooh, parting thoughts. I don't know. I'll just always think about your customer. Your customer's perspective is the perspective you need to be thinking about in business. Of course, take care of yourself, but and make it easy for people. Make it so easy for people to understand what you're saying.
Yeah, that's great. And my audience is oftentimes salespeople, and I think we're guilty, probably even more than marketing people sometimes, of focusing on our product and the features and the benefits and trying to sell us to the customer. And that's a great point that, focusing on the customer is really important. And then making those steps clearly outlined is great too. So, well, thanks again for joining. I appreciate you sharing your knowledge today, and have a great day.
You too. Thanks so much, James.